What's going on, everyone? Mike Kadlick and Tayler Kyles here for CLNS Media, getting you ready for Patriots 2024 training camp. A reminder that we are powered by Game Time. Use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Big question mark heading into this one is, of course, the wide receiver room. Patriots drafted two young wide receivers in Jalen Polk and Javon Baker, but a lot of mysteries, a lot of, a room that's frankly not had a true number one wide receiver, at least in my opinion, since the Randy Moss days. You can argue Julian Edelman. We could go on that tangent all day, but let's focus on this one. 2024. Some roster locks. Who do you think, Taylor, is, no question, going to make this roster heading into 2024?
Well, obviously, Jalen Polk and Javon Baker,
Right.
you'd think, because they were just selected guys who have the skill set where, Javon Baker, a fourth-round pick, but still plenty talented enough. We saw in the brief time he was on the field this spring that he was making a lot of plays. So Jalen Polk, another guy who slowly started to take advantage of his opportunities more and more. Just the wide receiver position is all about what the name implies, receiving passes, and I think that Jalen Polk did a great job of that. You see that, he's really confident in his hands in the way that he's consistently extending for passes, plucking them out of the air in a way that just looks different really from everybody else on the field. So Jalen Polk for sure. Once again, Javon Baker, I think he gives you one of those true one-on-one winning type of X receivers the Patriots haven't had in a long time. Will he be the true number one? Maybe. Obviously has yet to be seen. He has to earn the starting job before any of that happens, but I do feel confident in his ability to contribute this season. And then the third guy I'd say is a virtual lock, who I think is going to actually be on the roster week one, not on an injury list, is Demario Douglas, who I think was the best wide receiver in those spring practices, creating separation, attacking the football in the air, winning in a lot of red zone periods, which you wouldn't expect from an undersized guy, but it's just a testament to, one, his separation ability and also his toughness at the catch point. He moves in a way that nobody else on this roster does. Maybe undersized, but someone who I think plays bigger than that, and I would expect, Drake May likened him to Josh Downs, who was May's number one receiver back in 2022, so I would expect Demario Douglas to really be the alpha in this group. And then Kendrick Bourne, I'm not sure if he's going to be on the roster week one because I think he's probably going to start on the PUP list. Didn't participate at all in the spring. Gerard Mayo did say he expects that everybody but Cole Strange is going to be able to participate, but even when you look at videos of Kendrick Bourne running around, I'm just not sure he really looks ready enough that you expect him to be on the roster. And with a position that's got so many people fighting for a spot, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world if you kind of start off slow with him and keep him on an injury list. But I mean, obviously he just re-signed his contract, so Kendrick Bourne not going anywhere.
Yeah, I'm excited for Kendrick Bourne. I think that's the one I look forward to most. I mean, obviously Demario Douglas is the guy who's shifty inside. He's going to probably lead this team in catches once again. But Kendrick Bourne is a guy who told Andrew Callahan that he wants to be a captain this season. I'm excited for that. I think he's been around through the offseason program. He's been rehabbing here. He was on the field despite not actually participating. So we'll see when he ultimately gets on the field. I think you're right. He's probably going to start on the PUP list. It gives them, that extra flexibility, I guess, on the roster throughout the start of the season. And, frankly, so what if Kendrick Bourne misses the first 4 games? Then you kind of get him into the groove later on.
Exactly.
So those are in my opinion, too, those are the 4 locks. You're looking at the 2 rookies, Douglas and Kendrick Bourne, when it's all said and done with his injury. Who's on the fringe? You talk about guys like Juju Smith-Schuster entering the second year of his 3-year deal that he signed last offseason. Tyquan Thornton, a second-round pick in 2022 who, hasn't really been able to solidify himself. So who do you think is in that group, and where do you ultimately think they end up on the roster when it's all said and done?
So I actually do not have Juju as a guy who's kind of on the fringe. I'll talk about that more in the next category. At the top of the list, I'd say KJ Osborne. And especially with Kendrick Bourne's situation, I do think that he's going to end up on the roster by week one. It's just this skill set's a bit redundant with what Kendrick Bourne does. It's like the solid veteran, you know what you're going to get. He can survive over the middle. I don't think he's really the one-on-one kind of winner that Kendrick Bourne can be at points. I feel like Osborne's more Kendrick Bourne light, but at the end of the day with Bourne, you also don't know what you're going to get with him coming off of a serious injury. So because of that situation, I think that's KJ Osborne's way to the roster. Maybe he can contribute on special teams as well as a returner. We've seen him kind of in the mix there as well, but I do think even he's on a 1-year deal, which is why earlier in the offseason when we weren't sure what Kendrick Bourne's status was, I kind of had him as somebody who was a dark horse to not make the roster. But again, they do need that solid veteran presence that I don't think they really have outside of, Demario Douglas is his second year. He's not really even a veteran. So I do think that's the value that KJ Osborne brings. So if something were to happen, like Kendrick Bourne does for some reason, get back into the mix, then maybe that's where you see KJ Osborne not make it. And earlier I thought that because of other guys who I have on the fringe, like Tyquan Thornton and Kayshon Boutte, if they played well, it's like, all right, well, you're probably not going to keep Osborne because he's only on that 1-year deal. Give him a lot of guarantees, but, you're going to eat that if these young guys prove themselves. I don't think we're quite there yet, so Osborne at the top. Tyquan Thornton was somebody who I have on the fringe. I was excited, buff Tyquan. I joked about it. He put on some more muscle trying to protect himself because obviously he's just so far behind in his development process because of injuries. But even in the spring, he was inconsistent. He had like one really nice day. He also had drops, missed the last day of mini camp that allowed another receiver to take advantage of opportunities. So with Thornton, he really needs to have a very strong summer, and I'm not sure it's something we can expect based on where his career's been. Hopefully he can catch some kind of fire and give us some, that blazing speed. And even the route running that I was excited about with him coming out of college, he's just so far behind. We'll see. But Kayshon Boutte is, I think, the dark horse in this group because he had a fantastic last day of minicamp, winning in one-on-one situations. We talked about it. No longer has to deal with the legal situation. The charges were dropped. So now he really can make an impact on this team. I think if he continues to build on the momentum we saw in that practice, kind of like what happened last year where he was kind of quiet, but then in the summer, it felt like every day he made some kind of play. Wasn't perfect, but he did stand out. And when you look at him from a skills perspective and the size and what he's good at, honestly, I think he has a better shot than Tyquan Thornton because he can make contested catches. He can separate at all three levels. He's good after the catch. Tyquan Thornton's kind of more of a one-note receiver, so I do think if there's going to be anybody on that fringe that does make a real spot and actually contributes, I think it'd be Kayshon Boutte, which is huge. He's only in his second season, and as we saw when he was at LSU earlier on in his career, has a ton of talent.
Yeah, I'm totally with you on Boutte. I'm actually really excited to see. He has that clear runway now without the legal charges over his head, without any controversy or what have you. A guy who was really good in college, stepped in here, had a solid camp last year, kind of fizzled out throughout the season, but now again has a clear runway to try and make the team.
Actually, one more guy. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're good.
Jalen Reagor. I do have to throw him in there. When it comes to pure receivers, I think he was the team's second or third X receiver in the rotation. They also were very heavy with the veterans at the top. I think if he's going to make the team, it's going to be as a returner. He kind of seems like, even though there's been a mix, he's the guy for them. I don't really love what he gives you as a pure wide receiver. I think at this point in his career, you kind of know what he is, but that's why I have him on the fringe. As a receiver, probably going to be towards the bottom of the depth chart once all is said and done, and Baker and Boutte get more opportunities to show what they've got. But because of like what we saw at the end of the season against the Bills with that return ability and with kickoffs once again actually being a play.
They're fun again.
Right. They have an impact in the game. I do think Jalen Reagor is someone we can't count out, but more as a specialist than an actual wide receiver.
Yeah, I'll just add on the KJ Osborne situation. When they signed him, in the middle of March, they hadn't drafted two wide receivers yet. So, when that happens, it's like, oh, this guy, yes, it's a one-year deal, but $4 million, most of it guaranteed. He's going to be an integral part of the offense, at least for a season. Now, though, again, Boutte comes in, no charges over his head. Two rookie wide receivers come in. Jalen Reagor re-signs as well. Kendrick Bourne's obviously coming in, depending on his situation. It went from KJ Osborne's a virtual roster lock to he really might not make this team and actually has to come, show up, play hard and win over these next 6 weeks. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with all those fringe guys. One last group, Taylor, outside looking in. Who needs to do a lot these next couple weeks to try and get on the team, and who really, at this point, doesn't have a chance and is looking more so like a practice squad player?
I mean, I could go on and on about like David Wallace and Kawan Baker, of course, but really I think there's one name in this group that really stands out that we need to talk about. That's Juju Smith-Schuster. Now, he told us that he was back to 100% and he was healthy, which he said last summer, but this was after he had like an okay day, and I think it was OTA, so we're thinking, okay, maybe he's actually telling the truth. Maybe we can see a little more of what we saw last year in his final game as a Patriot in 2023 against the Steelers, where he pops off, has a big play after the catch, another really impressive grab downfield. But then, as practices went on, we started seeing, oh, he's only working with Tyler Hughes on the side, going at half speed, not really making an impact in practices. I just think, I mean, yes, he has to do a lot in the summer, but I just feel like he's so behind in terms of, like, there's young guys now who can give you more of that fire, more of that electricity that they haven't really had. And among the solid veterans, with Juju, I think he's redundant again. Like, Demario Douglas is probably going to take a step and be your slot receiver. And then it's okay, maybe he's on there in, like, base personnel groupings where they want to run the ball. But then there's KJ Osborne right there, and if Kendrick Bourne gets healthy, then it's going to be his spot. And then, you know, Osborne and Bourne are going to have to duke it out. So I don't really see where Juju's spot is on this team, especially with these young guys being able to hopefully contribute and show, okay, we got to get them in the mix. We do know with Elliott Wolf and the Packers front office historically, they like to get their young guys involved. So, I mean, I think putting Juju out there, unless you're desperate desperate and these young guys truly aren't ready, I think it's just a waste of snaps. And obviously there's going to be the dead cap situation, but I mean, you got plenty of cap space. You just eat the money. At the end of the day, you got to admit when you have a bad contract.
Second year into that 3-year deal, 3 years, $33 million. Is there any chance they can trade this guy?
Maybe, some teams get really desperate and if you need a receiver, but at the end of the day, if he's not doing anything for the Patriots,
right.
like other teams are keeping tabs on things like this. They read our work and they try to get an idea of what the local people feel about certain people on the team. And I'm not sure that Juju's going to be someone that we're writing about is, oh my gosh, maybe he is fighting for a spot. And if we're not, I don't see where his trade value is. Maybe on the Chiefs if something crazy were to happen and they really need depth. But even then, I feel like the ship there is sailed. Like they didn't bring him back, and I think that was for a reason. Obviously, I think the Patriots just threw more money at the end of the day. That's what it comes down to. But off chance, I think, and even if they trade him, I think you still need to eat some of the dead cap.
For sure.
Because I don't think another team is going to take all of it on. But it's a bad contract. It's really hard to move on from. That's why it's really tough.
Right.
When you pay good players, it doesn't really matter. Those deals always look good down the road. But when you give a player who's not really contributing for you, that's where it looks really tough because you're eating this dead cap space, but it's for someone who barely did anything for you last year, probably isn't going to be on the roster in 2024.
Going to be very interesting to see what happens. Obviously, the most important position on the Patriots right now to help the young quarterback in Drake May and also the new quarterback in Jacoby Brissett. So obviously super important to see what happens here. It's going to be interesting to see all the battles that happen outside here at Gillette Stadium as we get into Patriots 2024 training camp. We'll have you covered on Patriots Press Pass here every single day, so make sure you rate, review, subscribe, and check out all of our written work on CLNSmedia.com.
Make sure to subscribe to Patriots Press Pass for all your Patriots news and updates on YouTube, and for all our written work, make sure you check out CLNSmedia.com.